Media Network India. Ladies and gentlemen, the Indian Express Think is a thought-provoking forum that brings together thought leaders, policymakers, and corporate leaders to encourage a meaningful exchange of ideas to get the best minds to give it direction and solutions. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely delighted to share with you a glimpse about this series. Can we have the audio visual, please?
India is on the brink of a transformative urban evolution. With only 31% of the population residing in cities, the need for focused urban development to unlock India's full potential is undeniable. The World Bank predicts over 600 million urban residents by 2036. But without proper governance, this surge could strain infrastructure, worsen climate issues, and affect city living. To achieve the ambitious goal of cities contributing 75% of India's GDP by 2030, effective governance is crucial to foster innovation, entrepreneurship, and job creation. India requires $840 billion by 2036 to adequately invest in urban infrastructure. Additionally, cities across India need an estimated $1.2 trillion in capital funding by 2030 to meet the demands of their burgeoning populations. Developing affordable housing and expanding access to basic amenities, healthcare, education, and a clean environment for all residents are crucial to enhancing overall quality of life. What can Indian cities learn from the global experience to become better governed? What lessons can Indian cities draw from our own experience? Does the solution require minor legislative changes, or are deep structural changes needed? To make sense of India's urbanization, the Indian Express and the Omidyar Network India present a series of discussions on our cities, scrutinizing the challenges and the growth markers that can make Indian cities truly smart and meet our citizens' evolving aspirations.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to tell you that today's session will host a special keynote address by Shri Amrit Abhijat, Principal Secretary, Urban Development Department, Government of Uttar Pradesh, followed by an insightful panel discussion on the topic, how can my city boost skills and create more jobs? This session is going to be live on all the social media handles of the Indian Express. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, may I please request Mr. Udit Misra, Associate Editor, The Indian Express, to please join us on the stage for a welcome address with a big hand of applause.
Hello and welcome to this very special seminar on urbanization. Let me give a very brief introduction to the series. Indian Express with Omidyar Network in India has been organizing these seminars across the country, looking at different aspects of urbanization, and it sort of was a natural consequence of our doing a whole series of seminars on India's internal migration immediately in the wake of the COVID attack and the reverse migration that we saw. And we found that there was a lot to first understand what's happening to this country, where are people coming from, where are they going? And one of the remarkable things that I remember from those seminars is that rural to urban, which is typically is the more cinematic way of sort of looking at migration, is a very small proportion of the total migration. Much of the migration typically happens rural to rural. But the fact is that India's urban population is going to double in the coming 25 years. And as things stand, even with data sort of going back to 2011 data, we are already the second largest urban population in the world. And it doesn't sort of hit you immediately because we don't think of ourselves as such an urban country, but we are urbanizing at a very fast clip, even not realizing when we are urbanizing because we don't always have the data. So in every episode of these seminars, we've looked at different aspects. We've looked at infrastructure needs, governance needs. Today's edition is about jobs and skilling, because essentially cities are about jobs. Why do you come to cities in the first place? It's about better economic outcomes. You want more jobs from cities, you want better jobs, better quality of jobs, you want better quality of life, you want kids to have better education, better health outcomes. And the question today is whether India's urbanization as it's standing today, is that desirable? Is that the way we wanted it? If it is not, or to the extent that it is not, what do we need to do to get to that? To create better jobs, to get more skilling, and skilling is something that very few people understand. How does skilling sort of work in these matters? We have somebody, perhaps one of the best people to talk about it today. So let's get started. First of all, very grateful to Mr. Amrit Abhijat to agree to be part of the keynote speech and the panel discussion. Let me first welcome you for the keynote, and we hope to hear what's been happening in UP. Thank you, sir.
Can we have those 2 slides I asked about? So, good evening, everybody. Very nice, pleasant evening to be sitting here and speaking and hearing all of you today. I'll divide my speech in 2 parts. One is that this august audience must also know what we as a department and in the government of UP, what we are trying to do to manage the urbanization. My job largely caters to creating structures, maintaining structures, keeping the city clean, managing transportation within the city, and the lights, the drains, the water logging, the garbage, so on and so forth. So we do that. So I'll just try and give you a brief overview of how we are planning it programmatically to be able to meet the massive, rapid urbanization that UP is presently undergoing along with this entire country. Second is, how does our schemes and how the manner in which we are responding to urbanization creates challenges and opportunities within the skill sector, and how the Department of Urban Development or UP government is also aiding skilling, and if there are any gaps, then I would also want to learn from the esteemed panel that we have. So this is largely going to be the format. So the story begins like this, that we all know that the rate of growth of Uttar Pradesh is perhaps much lesser than the urban growth of India, which is at 35%, and UP stands at about 22%. But there are some number of cities which are growing very rapidly, and cities like Lucknow, Agra, Gorakhpur, Banaras, Meerut, and about 14, 17 of them have registered a rate of growth which is perhaps faster, or maybe sometime around where the national growth is. And this also has created one huge demand for us to be able to urbanize faster. When I was in the government of India, there was a very famous sentence my Honorable Minister Sri Hardeep Singh Puri used to say, that India was a reluctant urbanizer. And when Mr. Ji was talking about the phenomena of urbanization happening at a very rapid pace, I am reminded of the fact that despite India urbanizing, the Hindu rate of growth, which is otherwise the period is referred to, registered a slow rate of growth, and it was not something that we had a lot of attention on, largely because of the electoral democratic policies and the political economy of the period, because the number of votes largely was in the rural areas. But as urbanization started and with the liberalization coming in, we saw rapid migrations taking place, and also therefore the votes. So we saw that they acted in tandem, and normally after the period of 2004, government started a lot of programs in which urbanization was addressed in a slightly more comprehensive manner than what it did. Lately, thereafter, within the period of 2014, after Prime Minister Modi took over, there was a thrust on urbanization because he clearly stated it that urbanization or urban challenges need not necessarily be looked as challenges which we have to meet, but there are opportunities. And we have seen in the past 10 years that they actually are opportunities, and if addressed properly, they ensure not only economic well-being, but both professional and personal growth. Because people are coming to the cities not only to meet their economic challenges, but also to grow professionally and personally and get the advantages as, the goodies of life, if I want to say. So, programmatically speaking, I'll just go to the previous slide. We are trying to address the position and the problem of urbanization from a large number of schemes, which this slide explains it in parts. This is the growth history. In the period 2014, the allocation to the Urban Development Department was about 6,700 crores, Government of India and Government of UP put together. As I speak today, the total calculation from Government of India and Government of UP would be about 40,000 plus crores. So that's clearly about 6 times the budget. But if only state budget is looked at, then there is at least a 400% rise. Coming from 67 to about 24,000 crores, which is a huge segment of investment in the urban sector. Having said that, there are also avenues which we are trying to address rather than just going around doing some odd jobs of making the city clean. I'll just go to a couple of things in terms of urban infrastructure. We are not only managing roads along with the PWD department, which is managing roads also, and the development authorities, but we have a scheme for roads, we have a scheme for stormwater drainage, which was not looked after earlier. Ever since the Britishers left, the road or the nali, as we call it, was the primary focus in terms of what development was construed as. And with the climate change coming in and with, rains happening in a very close frame of time, we had to address this issue of stormwater drainage, and we saw what happened in Chennai and Hyderabad in last couple of years back, and therefore it was a lessons that we need to learn also. So we have a mission on that. We have a mission for plantation of trees. The Swachh Bharat mission, perhaps with the clarion call of the Honorable Prime Minister, and when he started the Swachh Bharat mission, happens to be one of the largest missions, and we review it on a day-to-day basis. In fact, right now, problems like legacy waste, problems like door-to-door collection, problems like segregation not happening, problems like streets strewn with the garbage around the day. These things are coming down greatly. I will not say that they are not there. I will be getting photographs from all over the city, but it is much more cleaner than what it used to be, because in the first 5 years of Swachh Bharat mission, we were dealing at more an ideation level, where we were motivating people, mass awareness, and bringing in some elements of change, making toilets. We have made about 9 lakh toilets in past since 2019 to 24. But you'll be surprised, just Kumbh alone, for a 50-day period, we are making 1.5 lakh toilets in the city of Prayagraj itself. So that is the kind of attention which is being paid to issues of sanitation, hygiene, so on and so forth. Another case in the point, I was just speaking about it yesterday, is Gorakhpur, which was otherwise so well known for this death of children and women during the JEE period, the Japanese encephalitis. It was common news that 100 people died, 40 children died. We hardly hear of anything of that sort. It is not only because of the interference they would have done in medical field, but also largely because hygiene, sanitation, urban growth, dust, disease was managed. So those are few of the things. Another important scheme is perhaps also looking at animals. So we have the Gaushalas, we have the animal birth control centers, because dog is a menace. So more urbanization means more dogs to feed on food that is left, and the now rising numbers, their behavioral issues. So these are some of the things we are also managing at a very, very different level, which perhaps is not in the public eye. Just to quote your figure, last 5 years, we've done 85,000 castration of stray dogs in Lucknow, city of Lucknow itself. And this year we could do only 8,000 because last year we managed 21,000 because there was a lot of media reporting around, dog biting people here and there. So these are the things we are also doing. The Swachh Bharat Mission Amrut scheme caters to the water supply issue and the sewerage issue, which was not there earlier. A large catchment of solid waste plants are being made to manage our liquid and solid waste, which can be a huge havoc in terms of what it does to the groundwater, what it does to our lakes and all that. So this is a very, very important scheme. All in all, just to give you a brief overview and just to emphasize that the government of UP as well as the central government is quite conscious of the huge challenges that we need to make to break this story and to be able to carry it forward, that urbanization does happen in a manner which is sustainable and we are able to meet challenges, because all this development has happened just in about 20 years time, starting from about 1995, 30 years, sorry, where a huge chunk of people are coming on a day-to-day basis for employment, either to find employment or to get employed, and we as a responsible body have to respond not only with cleanliness but give structures. So that's one part, how to make your lives more livable. Having said that, next slide. These are some of the facilities that we are trying to create for senior citizens. Lucknow was one of the pioneering municipal corporations. Started the senior care people because there will be a number of people who will be needing their services. For the working women, we are creating hostels, working women's hostel, which are not typically as the social welfare department sort of a hostel, but these are like absolutely Uber friendly, net connected with a Wi-Fi facilities, wonderful mess. They can do their own stuff. It is on chargeable basis. So these have begun. Student children, we are creating, sprucing up our sports facilities, parks, and specialized sports like rifle shooting, like swords, like athletics, the gymnasiums. Of course, these are being run by private people also, because we are quite conscious of the fact that it's best that it is managed by private enterprise, and there also comes an element of skill on which I'll go later. So this is by and large the digital study center. We opened one in Prayag. The number was 500. Now we are having to open 8 centers. It's so popular, and we are doing it in all the municipal corporations, where these study centers are places where people can come for a very low cost. They study there through the day, and it's a wonderful sight to see the kind of study and the struggle that these students are doing to be able to find employment at places. So these are some of the schemes, just to give you a snapshot of what we are doing. Now coming to the idea of skill development along with this, see, I'll just take 2-3 examples to prove how urbanization can really also create areas of skilling and a necessity that needs to be addressed. Kumbh is about to happen from, as I speak, 52 days from now. And the total investment that the government of UP and the central government is making, government of UP itself has made about 6,300 crores, including the money spent by other departments. This includes creation of bridges, highways, roads, entire sprucing of the city in terms of widening of roads. And the national government is making the national highways, which is being widened between the 2-3 main areas from which you will enter the city of Prayag. Huge bridges which are being made, airports being expanded. So this is such a huge turnaround in terms of employment potential that we create, because eventually the city of Prayag will benefit, but the people of Prayag who are working as lay laborers, beginning from there, to drivers, to people who will be managing the drones, to people who will be managing the security, about 2,800 camera facilities, drone facilities, entry systems, digital entry, AI systems, portage, guides, tourist management system. You have a list of activities in which we at least find few lakh people who will be employed on a very, very sustained basis in the period of Kumbh itself. This is a total investment of about 15,000 crore, how things can turn around. Second case in the point is, suppose we have a program by the name of National Urban Livelihood Mission, where we manage vendors. 76,000 SSGs have been created in the cities only, out of which comes out a program by the name of Rasoi, we feel that there is a segment of population who needs good home cooked sort of a food at various places. We started off as a pilot in 25 corporations, and this is now being expanded to 75, and now we plan to go to residences also where people are studying. These Shakti Rasoi, these women were trained by no less than as a hotel group by the Taj, Mr. Randeep Brar, and they find very good employment to the extent of earning about 2,000 rupees a day by these women where orders are given out. So that is another case in the point. Third case in the point would be like when we work for the working women's hostel, the senior care rooms, we need yoga instructors, we need people who can advise on finance, we need people, those who can run these institutions on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the mess or whether it's the security, whether it's the management of digital systems, to be able to cater to all that. I'll just give you another example of how urban growth can create wonderful opportunity for skilling and also for economic growth. I was looking after the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana when I was in the center. We, the state government as well as the central government, invested about 8 lakh crore in the PMAY phase 1. Just to rattle some stats, 1.25 crores houses in the urban sector was sanctioned, out of which about 85-90 lakh houses have been delivered various states. UP alone has made about 17.54 lakh houses in various cities. Now what really happens is, once you invest 8 lakh crore, you give fillip to the cement industry, you give fillip to the steel industry, you give fillip to the furniture, the street furnitures, electricals, pipelines, you name it, people those who color. So there is a huge turnaround effect, and to the extent that the overall impact on the economy is that you are able to manage a few lakh households in terms of skilling and in terms of opportunities of growth that it offers to people. Just one single scheme of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Just imagine the overall ripple effect that schemes can create on the fact of the skilling being done. So heritage restoration is another aspect. We have been restoring a lot of heritage activities. Obviously, there will be architects, there will be maids, there will be people who will be working on them to be able to create old structures. Then that is another example. Then ICCC is a digital management system that we have in almost all cities now. It cannot happen without the IT professionals. And we don't need MA, PhDs and guys who are the geeks only. We need people, those who can stand on the traffic portals, can manage our urban mobility systems, can run these buses, which are EV vehicles, then to be able to track the data from that. ICCC centers typically manage garbage movement, they manage hoardings, they manage events, they manage traffic movement, they manage the people's movement, they manage theft, so on and so forth. And these are all manned by computer professionals who would be sitting in somewhere in the Chowk area where the ICCC center is there, and it is almost all the cities. As I speak, we are also now moving to the Nagar Palikas and Panchayats. So it is not only making the cities livable, but while we are at the business of making the cities livable, these are also providing employment opportunities and a massive growth in skilling. Having said that, I would probably imagine that in a very conscious way, the Urban Development Department doesn't run a scheme for skilling apart from the National Urban Livelihood Mission. And I would feel that with you inviting me over, we got into this act that perhaps we need to churn out data in terms of actual number of people we as a department are also skilling, and whether we need to be conscious of this fact that our demands on the people creates also an opportunity for us to realize as to what is the number and where exactly are we landing. Because let's take the example of, say, the senior care center. Once we created it, we really don't know how to manage it, and we are asking for vendors to come in, but we know what we have to get the work done. Today, I went to the ABC center today, the Annual Birth Control Unit today. You'll be surprised to know that we have 2 centers, and the Government of India often refers to our centers as being the best in the country. We are getting 17 of them made. These will be run by organizations which are authorized and are, licensed by AWBI, or, just are given a go-ahead that you have learned the trade. They will need doctors, they'll need veterinarians, they'll need people who can manage. These 17 centers will deploy not less than about 200 people. So there is again a scope for veterinarians. There was no horticulture department earlier within the urban development department. We had one horticulture officer, but it was never thought of as a scheme. Now we know that green is important. We have to respond to climate change. We are making a provision under the green policy for having 3% reservation for horticulture itself. And when we say horticulture, it is not only an officer who will be paid out of this money. There will be growth of nurseries. There will be growth of training institutes who will then train people on how to do nursery level activities. There will be a lot of activity around the fact that cities have to be maintained green. So greener, cleaner, better cities also means more skilling, more opportunities of growth. And I feel that the government of India, in its wisdom, has taken up the right approach in terms of what we should be doing, not only to make cities more livable, but when the people actually come and stay in the cities, to be able to give them a better chance to grow professionally and to also enjoy the fruits of staying in an urban place. So this is all I had to say as opening remarks. I am open to taking more and more advice as we move towards the 1 trillion economy. Urban growth will be a very, very important driver in this entire strategy of UP government, and therefore I would be very keen to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for that insightful address. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed towards our panel discussion tonight. And in this league, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Udit Misra to please join us. And ladies and gentlemen, in this league, please help me welcome our esteemed panelists for this panel discussion. In this league, with a big hand of applause, please give it up for Shri Amrit Abhijat, Principal Secretary, Urban Development Department, Government of Uttar Pradesh. And with continuous loud round of applause, we also welcome Dr. Bornali Bhandari, Professor, National Council of Applied Economic Research. Please welcome Dr. Geeta Thatra, Associate Director, Research and Training, Workfare and Free. We also welcome on stage Paranjeet Chawla, Program Manager, Urban Economist, WRI India. And please help me in welcoming Smita Agarwal, Director and Chief Financial Officer, PTC Industries Limited, Chairperson, CII, Uttar Pradesh. And ladies and gentlemen, this session will be moderated by Mr. Udit Misra. Today's session will focus on how can my city boost skills and create more jobs. Over to our moderator.
Thank you. I'm just setting it up for 45 minutes because we are a little behind schedule as a marker for me. And all the mics are on, so please be advised with what you say. Okay, yeah, so thank you for that keynote speech. The policies, the schemes that you're running were quite remarkable, and the massive jump in the budget is quite a remarkable shift also. And I mean, the 2004 year that you mentioned is something that hits me because, you know, in 2004 we had the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And in 20 years, we have come to a point where many states now have urban employment guarantee schemes. So far from, you know, at that time when I was writing as a journalist, we had these conversations that when the economy improves, rural employment guarantee scheme will go away. Jean Drèze, who was one of the architects, was my professor at Delhi School. So when we're having these conversations, it was like, if the economy does well, then you won't need NREGA. But the fact is that now we have an urban NREGA kind of a thing. So it is at some level alarming that we are now going for those kind of things. And the broader question is that if India has to grow, growth has to happen in cities because that's where some of the more value can be generated. It can bring about the structural transformation that we want. We don't want to be an agrarian economy. We want to shift to manufacturing and services, and cities can do that. They can create those jobs. So the question in the panel today would be, you know, two rounds of, I want to go along on 2 rounds. Each of you would get, say, 5 minutes, 6 minutes to sort of make your point. One, I wanted to understand the current state of play. What is happening in urbanization in India? Everybody is coming from different angles, so they'll perhaps speak more specifically to what they're looking at. And then the second round, we'll ask the most pointed question on what are the solutions? You know, what more do we need to do to get where we want to be? Because obviously it's unlikely that everybody would say that we're already there, you know, so there's hardly anything, pack up and go. So then what needs to be done? What exact changes we need? And I would like to start off with Paramjit Chawla. You know, you're an urban economist. You look at the economic geography, as it were. So I want to start with you for a more macro picture of how do you see India's urbanization? Where do you think, you know, in relation to jobs and skilling, where do you think stand? How good or bad? You know, if you could reflect a bit on that.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for inviting me here. So I work as an urban economist in WRI India, and I think to answer your question with a question, I'll first ask, like, what is urbanization? Because there are definitional concerns with the term of urbanization, and not to say that it's wrong or right, it's just an evolving definition. And I think different countries follow different definitions. So we need to first look into what is urbanization. The second thing I would want to focus on is an economic geography approach. So what we do at the organization and what we would want to, you know, like look for is understanding how your city is currently developing. So it's not just looking at it from the statistical point of view of the numbers, but also understanding spatially how the city is being built. So I'll just give reference of one of the publications that we have on Delhi National Capital Region. So the most important thing is to understand what is the center of the city, because we know that people are getting, you know, attracted to cities because there are opportunities. And it's quite well written in literature that cities are spaces for economic opportunities. That's going to be there. But where are those economic opportunities? So in the Delhi NCR paper that we had, we did extensive research on spatial analytics and statistics to understand that there is a central business district, which is your core, which is the center of your city or the city region per se, where there is concentration of jobs. But then there is also a periphery which is growing around it. So if we want to consider a region like Lucknow per se, we need to understand where is it placed, where are the jobs spatially placed as well. We know that UP is the third largest economy at this point, and we know that cities are going to be the engines of growth, or cities are going to be the places where maximum amount of jobs are going to be created, but where exactly are they created? And of course, there are limitations of data not going into that direction. But where are they located? Are they at the center? Are they around the periphery? Because when we did the NCR study, we found that the core is actually hollowing out, which means that even though there's absolute employment is there, there are concerns that, you know, the jobs are moving to the periphery. So I think in order to understand your economic growth trajectory, we need to understand where jobs are as well. Of course, that also means understanding for a city or a city region, depending on what scale we're looking at, we need to understand where are your, you know, like, where is your specialization? Where are the people, you know, placed? Where are the skills placed? So wherever there are jobs, skills tend to follow, and vice versa. Of course, it's a longer gestation, but there are possibilities of those interconnections as well. So it's important to identify what is the current structure of the economy. So for example, for Lucknow, like based on a very preliminary reading of what I did, we found that service sector is quite prominent. And then we have manufacturing. So understanding and breaking down where is that service sector, using satellite data to understand that, and that's something that WRI India does, so that's why I'm speaking on behalf of that as well. And it's important to understand those structures. So that's another point. And last, and then I'll stop also because I know that we have limited time. The last point is also understanding that jobs can be created but they need to be created in a way that people actually want to stay in the city and do the job for a longer period of time. It's not just a matter of creating those jobs per se, which brings me to what Sir was also mentioning about livability and quality of life. So those enabling ecosystem needs to be present in order to create those jobs as well. So I'll stop there.
Very, very quick follow-up on the core is hollowing. That's a remarkable thing, you know.
Yeah.
So if you could briefly explain, you know, this jobs moving from core to periphery, why is that happening? What does that mean?
Yes. So it's also that it's, reached its potential, like the core, but it's also that there are more opportunities present in the periphery. So it's also about access to different services. It's also about more opportunities being created in the periphery. So your Gurgaon, Noida will have more opportunities and people would find it easier to stay in the periphery. So that would be happening. Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing that we often hear, and it's sort of now understood as conventional wisdom, is that, you know, when government puts in a lot of effort, a lot of money into something, then it creates jobs, and that, you know, many of the things that you talked about. And that's straightforward, that a lot of jobs would be created. But, you know, the question of skilling is sort of lost. In my understanding of what we look around when people talk about skilling, very few people actually understand what is exactly skilling. You know, it's just one word which is thrown around without any understanding. So I wanted to understand that, you know, it's one thing to say we'll create so many jobs, or that doing this will create so many job opportunities, but will there be people who can actually do that job? Are the people coming from the villages or the, far off places coming to cities for a better job, are they even capable of participating in that economy? Otherwise, that whole promise never actually comes through. So I would like to go to Dr. Bornali Bhandari, who's worked essentially on skilling, to sort of give us some understanding, give us a sort of a brief lecture on how can skilling open up the whole urbanization thing.
Thank you, Udit. Thank you, Udit. Before I go into skilling, I just want to emphasize that what Sir has done is, and what my previous speaker said, it's very important to identify the economic activities that are taking place. But economics by itself is not enough. When you want to understand jobs and skill, it is important to look at economics, it's important to look at demography, it's important to look at technological changes, spatial changes, and when you look at all of them together, then you can, and of course there's urban-rural transition also. So when you look at all of them together, then you can understand what are the activities that are taking place in cities. If you listen to Sir, heard Sir, he gave us a bunch of numbers, investments, but what I heard from Sir was essentially that he has a plan for the city. He is identifying all the economic activities that are taking place or potentially can take place, and then identifying what are the jobs associated with that. Am I right, Sir? But, and this is where the but comes in, we know some of the jobs that are being created, several animal birth control job in a city. It's one thing to be an animal, we know what jobs are going to be created, the veterinarians. But then, do we know what skills do we need to create a job? So essentially, one of the first things I want to emphasize is that skills is an indirect demand. Only if your economic activity is going up for that particular sector, then only will number of jobs increase, and then if number of jobs increases, then the demand for those skills will increase. So it is very important to understand that the skills is important for job because it helps you perform better, what we call is productivity. You can get more out for the same amount of time, or in a simpler way. The point is that we have to think, then we start thinking about skills, that what type of skills are needed for on-the-job performance. And here we need to, when we think about skills, skills is a much broader term than just, skills is a much broader term. Every of us sitting in the room are doing particular jobs, and in that job we require a combination of skill sets. What I mean by combination is you need cognitive skills. Skills like reading, writing, learning, communicating, which are all cognitive skills, but obviously there are more advanced cognitive skills like problem solving, creative thinking, artistically thinking. These are all more advanced cognitive skills. And these cognitive skills develop over time. They start right from nursery. They don't start, and we start acquiring those skills. Ability to read and write starts from nursery. And we start from those skills, and we are continuously doing this, and we acquire these skills and then apply them on the job. Also, we do on-the-job learning. The second type of skills are what we call, and we have adapted that from the psychological literature, on what I call socio-emotional skills. Essentially, empathy, working in a team, keeping your temper down. So these are all, there are 5 big psychological traits that we acquire, and we use them in our job, right? All of us know that we have done a job, you have to work in a team. If you don't know how to work in a cooperative manner, then, well, you're not going to perform. But the challenge is, are we learning those skills even in our schools and colleges? Or do we have to relearn our skills at jobs? And that's where the skill mismatch happens. And then there's a third set of skills, which is a technical and vocational skilling, which is essentially that you have the functional skills that you require for the job. All of us have this combination of skills that you would need to perform on the job. And that's where the skilling starts. The point is that once you identify that for every job, they require a combination of skill sets, then where do you acquire them? That becomes a question. And this is where the mismatch happens. Mismatch is that you don't find enough plumbers. You don't find enough veterinarians for your animal control. That's one problem. The second is that you may get a veterinarian, but they may not know how to perform on the job. So they may have the appropriate degree, but they don't know how to get the right on the job. So there are skill mismatches on extensive and intensive problems, extensive and intensive skill mismatch, which creates unemployment is one significant symptom of that. And to my third point, am I exceeding 5 minutes? Yeah. A third point very quickly is one example of how urbanization can create jobs is the platform workers, what we call are the gig or platform workers. So what we find is that food delivery platform workers in particular, which I've worked on, essentially are a very urban set of workers. You don't find them in rural areas. And you find that these workers are actually, they're using their phones, that is digital, they need digital literacy. They know how to use their phones, they know how to use GPS. They know how to talk to people at least a little bit nicely. And they know how to interact with businesses and restaurants. So these combination of skills makes them a platform worker. And this is a very unique kind of jobs that you would not find it. At the same time, these are fresh entry jobs that the students can get some learning, get some experience, and get on. And what we also found in some of the tier 3 cities, there are a lot of commuter migrants. That is, they're coming from the villages or coming from other towns to work in tier 3 or tier 2 cities. And these urban issues and urban problems and how to solve problems for them is urbanization, urban development creates particular jobs that need to cater to the needs of the urban economies. On that note, it's stop.
Thanks a lot. We'll come back to the unemployment and the unemployability bit, and perhaps we'll ask that question more pointedly to Smita, who sort of might be looking at it. But I want to also first go to Dr. Geeta Thatra. When we talk about India's demographic dividend, essentially it is about women coming into the workforce. Men as a percentage are there. You can increase that number, but there's only so much you can increase it beyond a point. It's essentially about women's involvement in the workforce, which is remarkably low, one of the lowest in the world. Even in some conflict-affected countries, the women participation is higher. So the question is the gender concerns and the informality that happens. The one crucial thing that differentiates between a city job and a rural job is the lack of informality. I mean, you hope that you come to city and the job would be a more formal job. We'll have salaried employment. It might have it'll take better care of you in terms of when you go down and not just leave you on the forces of nature. So Geeta, if you could reflect a bit on that.
Thanks, Udit, for that question, as well as inviting us on this panel. I'm a researcher, and I work with a non-profit organization which is called Work Fair and Free, and we have a legacy of working in the Western Migration Corridor with Ajivika Bureau. It's a long-standing labor rights organization, and that's where our focus is to look. Our research has its ears to the ground, and we mostly pursue grounded research to understand experiences of workers in cities as well as in the process of migration. I'd like to refer to what Mr. Amrit sort of started with, that there are these schemes, there are various interventions that are being made to sort of create jobs and propel job creation in urban areas. And there is a thrust even at the central level to create capital intensive, to invest in capital expenditure and create infrastructure, which indirectly creates jobs. In this budget, we also an indication towards employment-linked schemes, or one which gave impetus to job creation in manufacturing and the other to skilling. Right? So we see money being put into these kinds of schemes. What happens of it is yet to be seen, but what it does and how the nature of jobs that it creates is a question. And that's something that I want to reflect on, which is that with all of this job creation, what we are sort of seeing is an expansion or continued investment, creation of informal kind of employment. We are not, the investments that are made into skilling or the investments that are being done will only create a certain percentage of formal employment by linking it to the employment provided conditions where labor rights violations are rampant. They are working in conditions where, so for example, if you look at what are the sectors where they are employed, right? So that's also another important question when it comes to urban employment. Sir gave an example of how Kumbh will create all these kinds of jobs. What are these sectors? Right? So it's not necessarily in the manufacturing sector where we are seeing these jobs being created. We are seeing them mostly being created in the service sector. And in the service sector employment, they are all at the lower rung of the service economy, where what is your average salary? Your average salary is 12 to 18,000 rupees a month. And what is it that you are able to afford with 12 to 18,000 in a city? If you are in a first year city like a Bombay or a Delhi, what are you able to afford with 12 to 14,000 rupees? And this is what the COVID lockdown sort of, it really brought to fore for us the structural issues that are plaguing the nature of urbanization that is carried on in this country. Moreover, this we sort of imagined that urbanization or creating urban-led economic growth would alleviate rural poverty, would create more jobs. But what we are sort of seeing is two things. One, the nature of jobs are going towards informal employment. And second, we are seeing that workers who are coming to work in our cities, whether they are as construction workers who sort of build this infrastructure, or whether rickshaw pullers and rickshaw drivers who sort of cater to the mobility needs of the city, they're all at the lower rungs of the economy and earning, as Ajivika Bureau, we also sort of work on certain aspects of wages, where we sort of see wage theft is an everyday reality for urban informal workers. So having said that, we believe that the contribution of workers and migrant workers to city building economic growth is very high, but the urbanization that they experience is exclusionary. They come and experience problems that are, they live in conditions that are appalling. So where do migrant workers live? Or where do informal workers live? You could see them in slum settlements. You would find them in open spaces below flyovers. You will find them in open spaces that are government land. And you might find them in rental accommodation, which are sort of created very specifically for these groups of workers. When you look at the living and working conditions, both are terribly difficult for workers in the city. And that's the nature of jobs that we are creating. So we are not really moving towards a structure of an economy that's changing, moving more towards formalization, and some of the initiatives that are being taken are in the right direction, but they are not enough. And couple of more points. Yeah. The second thing I wanted to talk about was how capital-intensive infrastructure is important. All the road, highways, airports, all of that extremely important. No, there's no doubt about it. But what we also need is local level infrastructure development, whether that sort of caters to your MSMEs or whether that caters to informal workforce, which is, so you may have a slum settlement which doubles up as a home-based workspace, right? So the boundary between the work and livelihood is sort of not so divided. So in that sense, it's important that these infrastructure is being put into place. It's not only important for supporting those businesses, which will sort of generate employment, and that's where a lot of our numbers are, but it will also sort of help us to stabilize workers in a city. But because what we are sort of seeing is the appalling conditions. We may skill people to come from rural areas to work in cities, but they are not able to live in the city. So what we are seeing is a phenomenon of circular migration, which is distinct from whether it's a commuter migration or permanent migration. What we are seeing is people are not gaining a foothold in the city. They are not committed to staying in cities for longer periods. And because of these repulsive living arrangements. Now, to just address a couple of more things from the point of gender, which you sort of asked specifically, it's to say that we were seeing a declining labor force participation of women, and we also sort of saw that in the last 4 or 5 years, there seems to be some upward trend. But what is that telling us? It is telling us that women are getting more and more employed as self-employed workers. They are not really entering the wage market, wage employment. And that's where a big challenge is. Apart from these, there was a recent study by NCAER which sort of showed to us that women are doing very well on certain women's empowerment parameters, whether it is intra-household negotiations, whether it is education. They're doing quite well even at that front. The age at marriage is rising. So we're sort of seeing all the social normative conditions sort of transforming. But what we are not able to see is their rise in wage employment. And that's a matter of concern. And this is not necessarily linked only to declining women's employment. It's the overall trend of the economy where the jobs are stagnating. With that, just one last thing about gig and platform workers, which has been told that it will be one of the spaces that will create a lot more employment. It's important again to see what is the nature of employment we are creating there. Do workers have social security? We see that, there was a study which said their average working hours is 69 hours a week, which is like literally 10 hours every day, and you work for 7 days a week without a break. Oh, wow. And that's the nature of work. Those are the kind of jobs we are creating. And we see that across cities that we've seen some interesting move. There has been a legislative push to create social security provisions through, in Rajasthan, there's already an act, and there's one coming up in Karnataka. That's perhaps a direction to move towards, so as to create a legally binding social security provisions for informal workers.
Yeah, many salient points. I know macro data shows that even in the formal sector in India, there is a rise of informality, which is to say that it might be a firm, but then when it employs, it increasingly employs people in an informal manner, right? Bizarre, but it does that because it's maybe more convenient, lesser to pay, So we'll have to look at some of those things. Smita, if I could come to you, the private sector is both the villain and the savior of this country. We are moving in a direction where we increasingly demand or expect the private sector to really do the heavy lifting. And the government has done that. The Prime Minister has been very vocal about this, that this country can only go forward with the private sector really creating jobs. So from your perspective as yourself a person running a firm, but also as a person in CII, two things I want to understand. One, how much of a concern is employability? Because we say India has problem both unemployment and unemployability. So how much of that is a concern for you, and in an urban setting? And the other is the private sector, justly accused of essentially being exploitative, in the urban setting? Are they sort of pushing informality on people? Some of the points that Geeta talked about. What are the challenges you face?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Udit, and thank you for inviting us here and making us a part of this discussion. I think it's extremely meaningful to talk about this and to actually raise issues which we hope that will be heard, and there will be actions that will be initiated on them. And Sir spoke about a lot of the initiatives that are already taking place both nationally and within Uttar Pradesh. And just to set a context in terms of what is our requirement. We are sitting in UP, which is currently at a $280 million GSDP, and we are with an aspiration of becoming a $1 trillion economy. At the same time, we know that in India, which is, let's say, the fourth largest economy in the world, about 75% of the GDP contribution comes from the urban areas. In contrast, in UP, the contribution towards the GDP of the state, only 55% of that comes from the urban sectors. So there is obviously a significant push that is needed in the state if we want to meet this aspiration of becoming a $1 trillion economy, apart from the fact that, of course, it is a 13 to 15% growth target every year that we need to achieve if we have to get there. But just the fact that from a 55%, at least we have to jump to a national average of maybe 75 to 80% of urbanization, because as you said, and a lot of my fellow panelists have talked about earlier, if we were to increase the per capita, and again, being the fourth largest economy in terms of GDP, but we are very, very far behind in terms of per capita income in India. If we wanted to increase that, then one of the biggest areas of intervention and the paths towards increasing this growth in the state would be through urbanization. Already there is a significant amount of change that is happening, but of course we are still at a very low level as compared to the national average. Sir said 22% in comparison to a 35% or maybe a 40% urbanization rate in the country. Some of the key areas that I would like to talk about first, before I address the question that you asked related to what are the challenges of employability, is first we must understand where are these key areas of potential where jobs can actually be created. Specifically to UP, I would focus on 4 areas. And the first one, of course, Sir talked about quite a bit in his address, is the growth that is happening in UP in the sphere of construction and infrastructure. We know that about 57% of the highways in the country are now in UP. We have large infrastructure projects that have been taken up. We have more than 20 airports in UP, 6 of them being international airports. The Jewar airport project in itself is a huge project that has been taken up by the government, expected to create about 1 lakh jobs even during the construction period. And then post the construction, we expect so many more sectors and job employment opportunities to be created just because of the airport, the ancillary things that will come out around that, tourism, maybe special economic zones that are centered around that. So one of the key areas of focus within Uttar Pradesh is the area of infrastructure, where already a significant amount of spend is happening by the government, and there are many projects that are coming up. The second, possibly the largest second area that would create employment opportunities in the state is through the industrial growth that we are talking about. We have a few special economic zones that have been allocated that have become hotbeds of growth in terms of the industry. Noida and Greater Noida being great such examples. Lucknow also being one of the most urbanized places in UP, but a lot more of that needs to happen. While there is some growth, I don't think it is enough in terms of what we want, and also in terms of being able to create the sort of job opportunities that we should be able to do, looking at the kind of population that we have and also the kind of growth aspiration that we have for UP. So again, another huge contributor to jobs is the MSME sector. And one more thing that I would like to mention is initiatives by the government. For example, the defense industrial corridor being brought to UP. A huge potential there for creating jobs in the state with 6 nodes that have been identified. And these are some of the industries that we need to focus on because these are employment-heavy industries. I mean, setting up a cement plant is not that great an opportunity in terms of employment. While it may help and boost the economy, what you need to look at specifically, and that is something that has also been taken care of by the government in their industrial employment, the industrial IIEP, the policy, the industrial policy that UP has come out with in 2022, that also talks about an incentive for additional employment creation in the state. And these are certain measures that we need to do more of, and obviously we are at a slower pace than what is expected. The third, again, very, very significant area is the service sector, which I think Bernali also touched on. And we already see a huge influx in creation of jobs in UP in this sector, whether it is in the IT parks, whether it is in the health sector, and corollary to that is the whole logistics and the warehousing thing, which is again becoming a very, very significant area of development in UP. If we link it, I would say these are the 4 main areas where a lot of jobs are being created. And if we link this possibility of huge employment creation in these areas, it is in this context that we should look at the kind of skills that are being created in the state and whether the industry is participating enough for the skilling and how much of this responsibility can be given to the industry for this. We have some initiatives by the government. For example, we have the, apart from the National Skilling Development Corporation's missions, we also have the UP Skill Development Mission. But if you look at the data there, so for example, 12 lakh individuals skilled through this, but about 25 or 30% only actually being employed, actually being able to find placements. There is another mission that the government has launched, the Kaushal Satrang mission, which is again intended to skill about 2 lakh individuals. But how well is it aligned with the needs of these industries and specifically the kind of industries that I talked about, which hopefully will lead to that urbanization and those job creation? Again, there are over 300 ITIs in UP. A large number of them in a woeful state, maybe not so much infrastructure, do not have the capability to skill, do not have understanding of what is the requirement of the industry in order to give the right kind of skills to the diploma engineers or the vocational trainees that come there. So these are challenges that require both industry participation and also an overall infrastructural and basic policy support by the government. And I would say this is what we see on the ground today.
Right. Thanks a lot. Sir, if I may come to you, you deal with this problem on a daily basis. You're solving it as it's happening. But if you could just recap, and you've given a very detailed presentation, but if you could recap as from your position as a policy maker, as somebody who's trying to oversee this urbanization, what are the, and this is not about fault finding, it's about understanding, and your insights perhaps will apply to most people in your position across the country. What are the 1, 2, or 3 main challenges that you face when you look at urbanization and somebody asks you about urbanization? What do you say, this is the main thing we are sort of dealing with, this is very difficult to crack. This part is, if you could reflect a bit on that.
This may actually be very interesting. One of the very important things that I feel that with this culture of the welfare state being there for a very long time, a large number of people still feel that these services come for free because they vote, because they stay. And once you go and ask, because the municipal corporations or the urban local bodies typically are not bodies which are funded or budgeted under a separate head where we get the funds necessarily. It is expected after the 33rd and the 73rd and the 74th Amendment that these bodies will be given powers on the basis of which they will be able to raise resources. And whenever there is an adjustment on account of property taxes going upwards, or whether there is an expansion in the building, whether somebody has to pay for the water charges, we find resistance to be a very, very important factor. And this impedes their own development, because the better funded and resourceful the corporations or the urban local bodies are, they will be able to service the people better. There are estates which are able to do much better on account of the resources that they have. A case in the point is that, let's take a matching city in the nature of Surat. The annual budget of Surat is 13,000 crore as a city. And I've just told about the state is around 23,000 crore. So you can compare. Not that Lucknow and Surat are comparable. Surat would perhaps come for much more economic activity. But this is one big challenge, that we are unable to perform to the expectations of the people on account of the democratic processes and the whole concept of welfare state. And wherever there has been improvement, there has been a remarkable improvement last 5 years. In the city of Lucknow itself, the taxation and the overall revenue growth has been about 3 times since last 5-6 years on account of use of technology through the GIS, where we were able to locate old buildings which are either not being taxed or new structures which had come up, has enabled the Lucknow Municipal Corporation to initiate a series of things which otherwise they would have to wait or beg around for. That's one thing. Second is that when I talk of a mission like Swachh Bharat mission, or when I talk of sharing the responsibilities of the state as being an urban citizen also, I find that issues of waste segregation being still something we discuss as a matter of fashion. Like I got it checked within the CSI towers where I stay for all the very senior officers, and we do not even have a very simple thing of the organic waste and the plastic waste as segregated, and we feel that this is something that will get mixed anyway, and we'll find ways of justifying. So when we talk of development, we talk of it as if it being in an adversarial relationship with the state vis-a-vis me myself, but I can expect. But I think, and I've seen in many, many countries of the world, they demand performance from the government, but they also assist the government in a manner that they are able to deliver. So something as simple as that, today we were just going through the figures. The waste segregation of UP was slated to be about 92%. But the government of India itself told that, no, we got a survey done, this is not a fact. And these are things which we could be much cleaner as a state if some responsibility is shared. By just being responsible, we don't want any any act to be done, but they could just be responsible. And you'll be surprised, a neighboring state of Indore has got 6 divisions every household has, in the manner in which there is a plastic waste, there is an e-waste, there is a C&D waste, there is a refuse, and all of it. And Indore, no doubt, has been topping the charts for last 9 years in Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So these are 2 problems. Third problem is that too much too soon is happening, and there is this clamor for sharing the goods of development in terms of the political economy not being attuned to respond to the massive challenges. So we are talking of a GIS survey here, and there is a Savasad who perhaps wouldn't be ready to take it that way. So there is a lot of balancing act that we have to do in terms of setting up of infrastructures, and they often see development in core area pockets of development rather than being very neutral about the whole thing. So these are 2-3 things I feel if we can correct, then there will be a major thing. And fourth, as Madam Chala was speaking about, is that even as we train people, I have also dealt with the technical and vocational education. Our people, those who get trained, surprisingly, it so happens that it happens by default that if you are training somebody the wrong way, or if you're training in a wrong trade, then there are not enough takers. So the markets understands. So when I was in technical education, I all of a sudden saw that the beautician courses amongst the men was declining, and the courses for drone, the courses for computer operators, the cases for painters were increasing. So you know that there is a gap which is now being fulfilled. But the kind of training that we get to them probably does not find the kind of employability what you were talking about. They are employable, they have a degree, but they are not sucked in by the industries because the level of gap is a certain area where we need to really work. So we will have to up our ante in terms of the skill that we are able to provide to this sector. Otherwise, they continue to be laggards or get low wages because on account of things not being addressed.
Yeah, very valid points. I think what he's basically trying to tell all of you that you are the city, do something. Don't just expect the government to come through with all the solutions. Okay, the last bit is the solutions bit. In these seminars, we always try to focus on solutions. It's important to understand the nature of the problem, but also have some reflection on where the solutions might be. And in a manner which is not accusative, it becomes that way that people do not speak properly. So I'll go through the same channel and, with much lesser time now at our command, if you could give 2-3 pointed things that, if you could get them done, that this will make our urbanization better in terms of both skilling and jobs. This will sort it out, or this will make a substantial improvement.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So the first thing I would say is data-led approach to the entire problem. And I don't just mean like secondary data, I mean satellite data, statistical data, and also ground truthing. Because there's a lot of information that one would miss out if we don't do ground truthing. That's first. The second thing I would mention is more about what has already been mentioned about actually identifying opportunities with the amount of infrastructure that's available, and in UP that is already available. So identifying opportunities for job creation and therefore like attaching it to skill development becomes important. And the last point that I would say is, again, going back to the same point that I had before about enabling an ecosystem which involves quality of life and sustainability issues as well, as Sir was mentioning, like understanding climate change and all of those things. So if you create an ecosystem which enables people to come in, then jobs also get created and economic development also follows. So yeah, I'll actually stick to that. Thank you.
Burnali.
I just want to take a step back and then just give an illustration. I was evaluating in industrial training institutes, and I was in Delhi, and this is in the midst of a major industrial center area. And when I asked I was talking to the students and asked them what their aspirations were. They said that I want to do a polytechnic degree. After that, I want to do an engineering degree, and I'll get a job. I'm not even thinking about a job. When I spoke to this, for the same program, I went to Meerut, and I spoke to the ITI students there. Of course, they were of poorer quality, but that aside, I asked the students, what do you want? I mean, what do you want to do? Have you thought about it? And their standard answer is, madam, we want to just apply for the metro exam. Metro mein hamare sare jobs hain. That's where the jobs are. They want, and have repeatedly, because Delhi NCR, whenever we want to test something out, we immediately go to UP. And the standard answer is, we are preparing for government exams. Now, why am I telling you this? The reason is aspirations. There are 3 sets of stakeholders in any economy: the government, the firms, and the households. And UP's population is very young. The demography is very important. It's one of the youngest population in the country. If you want to address any solution, jobs, skills aside, we have to talk about aspirations. People have aspirations. I mean, Karnal and the firms I'm talking to, they said they don't want to come into manufacturing jobs. They would rather become e-rickshaw drivers or work on food delivery platform. They don't require skills. They can start earning money from the get-go. I'm talking to someone in Panipat. I asked them, what will you do afterwards when you get older? Do you still want to do this job? Madam, I get a, there's a certain coolness about taking your motorbike and going around the city. So So important thing is, one of the key interventions that we need to do in UP, especially if you talked about UP, is manage aspirations. The government cannot create that many jobs, and not everybody is going to absorb. You are going to find workers sitting at home just preparing for exams for 10 years and then suddenly finding out, oops, I did not land a government job. Catch them young. Intervene in schools, colleges, ITIs, wherever, but start managing aspirations, counseling and guidance, career guidance, counseling, sitting to them, what kind of skills do they have, what kind of jobs they can get, not killing their aspirations, but managing them. That is one policy intervention that I'm very passionate about, that we need to do, especially in the UP, especially because the population is so young, that we need to talk about. Of course, on the firm side, ultimately jobs, on the demand side, their jobs need to be created, good quality jobs. And on the supply side, we need to intervene through better skilling so that they can get the jobs they want. There's a mismatch problem. But there are other interventions there, and large firms, typically large firms in India, are actually creating their own skilling opportunities. They're actually skilling their own labor. The challenges in MSMEs. Again, UP has a lot of MSMEs, and that's why the supply side becomes problematic, because no MSME is going to invest in their workers because they fear invest and then they will leave. So no MSME is going to invest. So the supply side of the ecosystem is very important for the MSMEs, and the important thing is, on the aspiration side, we have to start managing aspirations. Otherwise, we are going to find a lot of disgruntled people around 30 years old who are unskilled, no experience, and do not have a job.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think, as usual in life, marriage celebrations are impinging on jobs and skills. So very quickly, please, otherwise they will invite us to dance. Yeah.
I'll draw some of the things I spoke.
Yeah. Is the mic on? No. I mean, it's audible to me.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll draw on some of the things I had mentioned earlier, and one of the key things that I want to say is, given the nature of urban development and the trajectory that we are going to follow, which is capital-intensive infrastructure-led growth, we will end up creating more and more informal jobs, and we will end up creating more and more big cities, which are expanding to the peripheries with inadequate infrastructure, with inadequate services, and all kinds of things. So in terms of solutions, at least to manage for the migrant workers and informal workers in cities, some of the things are to say, let's have public provisioning of basic services, which I sort of echo what Mr. Amrit said, that ULBs and states will have to play a greater role at that level, and also getting funds at that level is significant, because it is at the local level that we will be able to address these challenges of public provisioning. So if you just take an example of simple thing like water, if you're earning about 12,000 rupees, you're spending 700 rupees to get drinking water. So that's the kind of challenge that there is. So and I'm talking about all kinds of public provisioning, whether it's water, whether it is sanitation, and whether it is roads infrastructure, which will both cater to migrant workers in their workplace as well as in their residences. This will also double up for investments to MSMEs, which will be an important support system for that group of, which is where the employment is getting generated. Third, when we're looking at large infrastructure projects where construction workers, especially migrant construction workers in most cities, are sort of fueling that, that employment or that growth, is to sort of think of how BOCW board works, whether funds allocated for those boards are being dispersed, whether workers have access to that, those funds. And we're also seeing that with large-scale, large projects, there's a move towards defeminization of construction work, wherein a large number of women who used to earlier work in construction sector are now being withdrawn by these large companies. And so we are seeing a pattern of defeminization of construction due to automation and large infrastructure projects. So think along what are those issues where women are employed and how we can sort of work on that. And the last point I want to make is the dichotomy between labor governance and urban governance. I'm sure Sir will echo this point. For example, if you look at urban peripheries, where most industries are coming up, it's the business of industrial development corporations, state industrial development corporations, to provide services and to provide infrastructure. And there you do not have the play of ULBs. So how, this dichotomous relationship between the ULBs and the industry development corporations, where workers fall through the cracks of these systems. So that's perhaps another thing that would require intervention.
Right. Thanks. Thanks. Very insightful points. Smita, very quickly.
I'm going to try and keep it very short. I would say basically 3 points. The one thing that we've all touched on, which is the skill mismatch. And I think one of the key areas to address in this is to have maybe public-private partnerships or some kind of engagement with the industry. I think Dr. Bhandari also mentioned that there are larger corporations and industries are able to do their own skilling, but the MSMEs sadly cannot, and they do not have the resources or the infrastructure. So there's some kind of models to be developed where we can identify what are the needs of the industry and then provide skilling in that. The second aspect is the gender aspect. A large number of women which are not in the formal workforce, I mean, I think in UP the numbers are even more dismal than in India, which are already dismal. So we need to focus on that, and then also focus on bringing more and more women into jobs which are not traditionally considered correct for them, like all caregiving kind of jobs, nurses, teachers, in those kind of segments, rather bringing them into the manufacturing space, and of course a huge potential for women in the service sector. So again, those kind of skillings where digital skilling missions or imparting skilling to women through various means, and also policies which support more women coming into the workforce. And the third, I would say very simply, also encouraging entrepreneurship, so having more job creators sometimes than job seekers, and therefore encouraging a large number of youth or young individuals in the state to also become entrepreneurs on their own and be able to create those opportunities.
Right. Sir, last word to you. Everything about your job is about constraint optimization, Imagine there were no constraints and you could do a few more things which otherwise are difficult. What are those 1 or 2, 3 things that you would say, yaar ye karo to baat banegi?
From the skilling point of view, I thought that as we were just being told that some data-driven analysis of the requirements in the coming times would probably help the polytechnics and the industrial organizations to plan things better, because often, as it happens in our country, is that we follow the herd system of large number of people getting into the same sector, large number of farmers doing the same thing. So I think that variegated approach and the use of technology in determining this also. I am an avid user of Instagram, as any sick person would like to do. I see that people are making a good amount of money early morning trading. So trading itself is a skill now. So we were just hearing this music. So as we go along, there are a large number of sectors which are opening up, but we are not attuned to examining things digitally, to look at things in a very futuristic way. So I think there is a large scope there that some data-driven crunching can help us get into sectors which are emerging within this entire gamut of urbanization. And as I told you earlier, that we deserve to stay in better cities now, and we are working towards making the cities more livable. But if I were given an opportunity, I would probably look at a more aggressive form of urbanization where we are able to provide resources in a big way, also boost investment. So that is what we have been doing in UP particularly. I think we have 4 women on the panel here, and 3 of them are from outside the state. And it would be nice to just take a head count of whether they like the city of Lucknow from what it was earlier. And if the answer is yes, I think we've got our report cards in order. So thank you.
Lovely. So I'm very grateful to all the panelists. You've given your time very generously, and it has been a very insightful discussion. I think The video would be there on Indian Express's YouTube channel. You can come back and rewind and listen to some of the things, because it was a massively packed session with a lot of insights. Very grateful to all of you for sparing the time, and thanks to all the audience also for patiently listening. Thank you.
So we request our respected panelists to please join us for a group photograph so that we can capture this moment. So once again, we would like to thank our respected panelists for contributing to this panel discussion and sharing their thoughts and insights. Let's give it up one more time for them, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you, Mr. Mishra, for moderating the session so well. And ladies and gentlemen, we thank you all, our esteemed guests, for largely contributing to the success of this event. I humbly invite you to please join us for the high tea session. Thank you.